So while non-point source pollution is typically kind of a human society, individual's problem, it's mainly due to storm drains. And cities are the ones that control those storm drains and regulate those storm drains and build them, etc. So we're going to explore how cities and just different technologies that are available with storm drains that are a little bit bigger picture. And the way you and I can support this is by voting for individuals who are supporting those similar measures. Or you can even get involved in local government yourself to propose them. So one potential solution of non-point source pollution is the big issue is stormwater is not cleaned. So why not just clean it? Like, why not just divert stormwater to a wastewater treatment plant? And we call these combined sewer and stormwater systems. So let me use the picture on the left to kind of describe what this system is. So this is showing a nice sunny day. Here is an apartment building, and the water coming out of it is representing the sewer water. Toilets flushing, showers running, etc. Then this water is flowing down through the sewage pipes and to the POTW. This is a wastewater treatment plant. That's where it gets cleaned. Now here's a car parked here. Maybe like they poured some Coca-Cola out of their cup and it drains into the storm drain. You notice the storm drain is also connected to this sewer line and would also go to the wastewater treatment plant. So this is great, right? It's more or less one set of pipes. It all leads to the sewage treatment plant and it all gets cleaned before going back to the environment. This sounds like a brilliant idea, a wonderful idea. It would solve a lot of the issues we're having. But it doesn't. So during dry weather, it's perfect. It works exactly as intended. The problem is rainy weather. So here we have the same exact image. Here's an apartment building. They still have their sewage, but the roof is now collecting water. It's going down the downspout. The storm drains are collecting the water from the parking lots and from the roads. And you notice it's filling the sewer pipe a lot. And actually the sewer pipe going directly to the wastewater treatment plant is packed full. So there's a fail-safe in these combined systems. Well, there is called something an outfall pipe. If the water level gets too high in the sewer pipes, the water goes directly into the environment. So water is still going to the wastewater treatment plant, but if there's too much water, the excess goes into the environment. This is no bueno, because if you remember, this is stormwater and sewage. So this apartment building, when they flush their toilet, that might have been the overflow and it goes directly into the environment. Now you might think, well, why don't we make the pipes bigger? Why don't we make the wastewater treatment plant bigger? Because it's not worth it. The wastewater treatment plant, if we were to double it in size, think about the cost associated with that. But how often would you need it to be that large? Maybe once a month at most. In some areas, maybe, once a year would they need a wastewater treatment plant that large. They'd have to replace all the sewer pipes, which exist under the entirety of wherever you live. So it just doesn't make sense. It's just not financially viable. And even then, they would still have to create the dam and the outfall pipe just in case. So while this is a great idea in dry weather, so this might be optimal for places like Arizona or Southern California that get no rain. But anywhere that gets any kind of amount of rain, it just creates this human sewage problem into the environment. Fun and kind of gross fact. So Washington, D.C., about 1/3 of the city is still on a combined sewer and stormwater system. We see these combined systems in much older cities. Once upon a time, before we had so much impervious surface, this system worked a lot better. But because we have so many more buildings, parking lots, roads, so much more impervious surface, the water going into the storm drain is a lot more than it used to be. So with DC, pretty much after every single rainstorm, if you drive over the bridge that crosses from Virginia to DC over the Potomac, you will smell the smell of human sewage. which is wonderful. This is not the only place. It's not just Washington, D.C. I'm going to show you guys a video here soon looking at a town in Rhode Island that's having the same issue. And it talks about the impacts to tourism and the impacts to health in that video. And it also talks about some of the financial problems related to it. They'd love to go back to a separate system, but they just don't have the money for it. So go ahead and pause here, click on the link of the video coming up above me to learn more about what's happening in Newport, Rhode Island. All right, so you might have been like, well, that wasn't really a solution. Like, we're actually trying to move away from that. Yes, but I wanted to mention it because maybe you even thought of that. Something else that cities could do is thinking about capturing pollution at the stormwater locations. So in this picture, you see this series of 6 nets, and what happens is water comes out of these storm drains. It's going to have different litter and pollutants in it, and comes down, has to move through the storm drain and collect whatever large litter it can. This is cool. Costs money, not too much, but it costs money. The problem is that you really need to understand how much water comes through in a storm event and how quickly these fill up. This is really great for like the dry days, but for the wet days, this system is so over inundated with water, we cannot empty these fast enough to catch all the pollution. So if a city has excess funds and they want it to go somewhere, this is a possibility. But unfortunately, it's just not effective enough to justify the cost, especially if it's a city that doesn't have extra funds. So cool concept, it does work. It's just not effective enough, especially for very rainy and impervious areas. If you look at this storm drain, right, there's huge 3 pipes, and you can get an idea of how full this gets by looking at these concrete walls. Those concrete walls are to hold in the water that sometimes fills this. So you're looking at, I don't know, this looks like maybe 4 or 5 feet tall, and these nets are like 1 foot tall. So that's what I was kind of talking about with the effectiveness. So they do work, but it's probably not financially feasible for a lot of areas. And then last but not least, and this is actually part of a Clean Water Act regulation. So I know we've talked a lot about non-point source pollution not being regulated, but there's a couple things the Clean Water Act can do. So when you have new construction, what the Clean Water Act tells that company who's creating that building or what have you, that they need to do stormwater mitigation. They need to do something to help reduce the amount of pollution in stormwater because they're building a parking lot, they're building a building, they're creating impervious surface. So what a lot of these companies do is build something, I'll show you that here soon, that redirects stormwater before it actually enters the series of pipes that take it into the environment. So here's an example I'm actually going to put both of these up at the same time. So we'll look at something that's in a parking lot. So here's a parking lot at Lowe's. This is not an endorsement of Lowe's in any way. And if you look particularly on the right hand side, you have these parking spots, and then you see there's like cutouts of the concrete all along the parking spots. This is a low point in the parking lot, so when it rains, water is going to flow off of the parking lot into this green space. This green space has trees, it has shrubs, it has different grasses, it has obviously soil, so it has a lot of life in here that would really like to use that water. And a lot of plants also have the ability to clean out different chemicals. So if motor oil was in that water, if antifreeze was in that water, some plants can actually break those things down. Now, we still need to have a fail-safe. So this drain you're seeing here is if there's too much water, it kind of like will bypass this garden and go into that drain, which enters the stormwater drain system. But still a really cool system. And the goal is to hopefully catch most, if not all of the water, let it settle out into the environment or this kind of rain garden, and maybe it doesn't even enter the stormwater system at all. A similar design is looking at this pond. This exists everywhere. Most of the lakes that you see, most of them are stormwater retention ponds or retention lakes. So very similar concept. You don't see it in this picture, but on the left-hand side, there is some storm drains bringing in water. Maybe it's bringing in water from a parking lot that's nearby. That water enters this lake. This lake has lots of vegetation around it. It has vegetation on the bottom. It has soil. It's pretty much like a lake or like a pond. It's giving the water a chance to slow down, to get cleaned, and it kind of remain there versus going down a pipe, into another pipe. Now, something you see in this picture is very similar to what we saw in this rain garden, is we still have a fail-safe. We still have a way for that water to enter into the stormwater system in case this pond gets so overflowed. Remember, our goal is to prevent flooding. We don't want this parking lot flooding. We don't want this neighborhood flooding. So there are still drains to take water into the stormwater system that goes into the environment, but the goal is that won't happen. So again, this is actually something that's regulated and required of companies to do when they're doing new construction. But some companies that may have been around for a long time may also do it as well, just to do their part in helping the environment. So really cool system, and keep your eyes out. You will see these everywhere once you realize you know what you're looking at. So while you and I are kind of the masters of, well, we need to just not leave our trash or let things leak and things like that, ultimately, ultimately it's on us. But there are some cool technologies and initiatives that cities, counties, states, even federal levels can help to reduce this non-point source pollution through our stormwater.